In the first presidential election year of the sound era, 1932, this picture, Howard Hawks' Scarface, starring Paul Muni, was a most violent and brilliantly anti-heroic conclusion to the popular gangster cycle. And as Franklin Delano Roosevelt became president for the first time and repealed Prohibition 56 years ago, the gangster era of the 20s was officially over. But 1932 was also the year of a very popular love story. A tragic love story set during World War I, based on Ernest Hemingway's novel, A Farewell to Arms, co-starring Gary Cooper and Helen Hayes, and directed by the master of sad romances, Frank Borzage. And 1932 was the year Marlene Dietrich went from femme fatale to devoted mother in her own fashion in Joseph von Sternberg's Blonde Venus, co-starring Herbert Marshall and Cary Grant.
If the moon began to waltz, or the sun did somersaults, do you think I'd care or stop and stare? I couldn't be annoyed.
The next election year, 1936, was of course in the midst of the Depression, and Roosevelt won again while an old favorite named Charlie Chaplin presented the last silent film ever made. Modern Times was also the last time Charlie played the tramp, though for a while he was a worker in the assembly line world. Still, with the help of Paulette Goddard and the music for Smile, which Charlie also composed, he broke through finally to the freedom of the open road. Since the whole country was dealing with the Depression, the movies sought to alleviate the blues with comedies, and what could be more timely than a screwball love story like Gregory LaCava's My Man Godfrey, about a forgotten man, played by William Powell, and a daffy rich girl, played by the incomparable Carol Lombard. And 1936 was also the year even Astaire and Rogers had to dump the frocks and white tie and tails and go to work, their kind, in George Stevens's Swing Time. By the next election, by 1940, when FDR won again, the Depression was nearly over and the great tragedy of the Dust Bowl was fading as John Ford made the darkest of American pictures about that era, The Grapes of Wrath, based on John Steinbeck's novel about the homeless Okies and starring Henry Fonda as Tom Joad.
Wherever there's a fight so hungry people can eat, I'll be there. Wherever there's a cop beating up a guy, I'll be there.
Yet during this 1940 election, the war in Europe was already raging, and that lent special poignancy to this pre-war story from the German master Ernst Lubitsch. The Shop Around the Corner, a touching comedy love story set in Mr. Madicek's store in Budapest, co-starring James Stewart and Margaret Sullivan.
Oh, no. Yes, I was. Don't you remember? I called you bow-legged. Oh, well.
But Howard Hawks' His Girl Friday, starring Cary Grant, Rosalind Russell, and Ralph Bellamy, was the one picture that both looked backward to the gangster 20s and forward to the cynicism of our own times.
Take Hitler and stick him on the funny page.
In 1944, as Roosevelt won his fourth and final election, one of the most popular films of that year took us back to an earlier era in London, but also looked forward to the kind of haunted psychological dramas that were to come in the later 40s and 50s. George Cukor's Gaslight, co-starring Ingrid Bergman. She won the Oscar for this performance, and Charles Boyer, Joseph Cotton, and Angela Lansbury.
The gas just went down.
You saw that too?
Why, yes.
Oh, then it really happens. I thought I imagined it.
But the war still wasn't over in 1944, and it continued in the background and foreground of two other favorites from that year. In Preston Sturgis's classic, The Miracle of Morgan's Creek, small-town girl Betty Hutton goes on one date with a soldier during which she gets drunk, married, and pregnant, but can't remember the guy's name or anything about him. So Eddie Bracken steps up as her hero, and she eventually has sextuplets.
You did say you were married. You did say you were married.
But the fight against fascism was perhaps best personified in Howard Hawks' love story adventure, To Have and Have Not, based loosely on Hemingway's novel. This is the picture during which Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall actually did fall in love, turning fiction into fact.
Maybe you're meant to be mine. Maybe I'm only supposed to stay in your arms a while, as others have done.